Stay calm and don't let anything take over your life. There is a version of you that reacts to everything, absorbs everything, and slowly loses control without ever noticing it is happening. And then there is another version of you, quieter, sharper, untouchable. The difference between them is not strength, intelligence, or luck. It is control. Think about this carefully. How many times have you allowed something small to completely change your state? One message, one look, one unexpected inconvenience, and suddenly your mood shifts, your energy drops, your clarity disappears. It feels automatic, almost justified. But it is not the situation doing this to you. It is the absence of control in how you respond to it. Most people live like this every single day. They wake up already reacting. They check their phones and let information dictate how they feel. They enter conversations already influenced by stress, expectations, or frustration. They move through life as if they are being pushed, not as if they are choosing. And because this pattern repeats, it starts to feel normal, familiar, invisible. But here is the part no one tells you. Every time you react without awareness, you are training your mind to give up control. You are reinforcing a cycle where anything external can take over your internal state. And the more this happens, the less you even notice it. You start believing that your emotions are caused by the world, instead of understanding that they are shaped by your response to it. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine walking into the same situations, facing the same challenges, hearing the same words, but nothing shakes you. Not because you are numb, not because you do not care, but because you have built something most people never develop. The ability to remain stable regardless of what happens around you. This is not about becoming cold or distant. It is about becoming precise, aware, intentional. It is about choosing your response instead of surrendering it. And once you see this clearly, you cannot unsee it. You start to notice the exact moments where you used to lose control, the subtle triggers, the automatic reactions, the patterns that used to run in the background without your permission. What you are about to understand goes deeper than simple calmness. It is about reclaiming authority over your own mind. Because the moment you stop letting everything take over your life is the exact moment your life begins to belong to you again. The moment when you get lost without realizing it. There is no alarm when you start losing control. No warning sign, no dramatic shift that makes you stop and say something is wrong. It happens quietly, almost invisibly in the smallest moments of your day. A reaction you did not question. A thought you accepted without hesitation. A feeling that took over before you even realized it had arrived. At first, it feels insignificant. You brush it off. You tell yourself it is normal to react that way. Everyone does it. You move on quickly, without looking back. But these moments do not disappear. They accumulate. They form patterns. And over time, those patterns begin to define how you think, how you feel, and how you move through the world. You are not losing control in the big, obvious moments. You are losing it in the ordinary ones. When someone says something and you react instantly. When something does not go your way and frustration takes over. When your mind starts racing and you follow every thought without questioning where it is leading you. This is how control slips away. Not all at once, but piece by piece. What makes this dangerous is how subtle it is. Because you do not notice it, you do not challenge it. Because you do not challenge it, it becomes part of you. And eventually you start believing that this is just who you are. Someone who reacts, who gets overwhelmed, who gets pulled by circumstances. But that is not who you are. That is what you have practiced. Most people try to change their lives by focusing on big decisions, big goals, big turning points. But they ignore the small moments where control is either lost or strengthened. They overlook the exact places where real change begins. If you cannot see these moments, you cannot interrupt them. And if you cannot interrupt them, they will continue shaping your life without your permission. But something powerful happens when you start paying attention. You begin to notice the precise instant before a reaction takes over. The split second where you feel the impulse rising. That is the moment most people miss. And that is the moment that changes everything. Because in that space, even if it is brief, you have a choice. And that choice is where control is rebuilt. Once you start seeing this, you realize something that shifts everything. You were never actually losing control all at once. You were giving it away, one unnoticed moment at a time. And if it was given away like that, it can be taken back the same way. The sensation of urgency that is not real. There is a constant pressure running in the background of your mind, a silent voice telling you that everything needs your attention right now, that you have to respond, fix, decide, react immediately. It feels real. It feels important. But most of the time, it is completely artificial. This sense of urgency is one of the most powerful ways your mind loses control. Because when everything feels urgent, nothing is questioned. You stop analyzing. You stop choosing. You just react. Think about how often you feel rushed without a clear reason. A notification appears and you feel the need to check it instantly. Someone says something and you feel the need to respond immediately. A problem shows up and your mind starts racing, as if delaying for a few seconds would make everything worse. But here is what is really happening. Your brain is trying to eliminate discomfort as fast as possible. It interprets uncertainty, silence, or delay as something negative, so it creates a false sense of urgency to push you into action, not because action is necessary, but because it wants relief. And in that moment, you confuse urgency with importance. Not everything that feels urgent actually matters, and not everything that matters requires immediate action. This is where control is lost again. Because when you operate under false urgency, you give up the space needed to think clearly. You let pressure dictate your behavior. You allow speed to replace intention. The result is subtle but powerful. You start living in reaction mode. You become available to everything, influenced by everything, controlled by anything that demands your attention loud enough or fast enough. But when you slow this down even slightly, something shifts. You begin to see that most situations do not require instant responses, that many thoughts lose their intensity if you do not engage with them immediately, that the world does not collapse if you take a moment before acting. This realization creates distance, and in that distance, you regain clarity. You start asking different questions. Does this really need my attention right now? Am I responding because it matters or because I feel pressured? What happens if I wait? And suddenly the urgency begins to lose its grip. This is not about becoming passive. It is about becoming deliberate, choosing when to act instead of being pushed into action. Because the moment you stop treating everything as urgent is the moment you stop letting everything control you. And once you break this pattern, you begin to notice something deeper. The urgency was never coming from the outside. It was being created inside you. And if it is created, it can also be controlled. When your mind starts working against you, there is a point where your mind stops being a tool and starts acting like an opponent. Not in an obvious way, not like something you can easily detect, but in subtle patterns that slowly pull you away from clarity and control. It begins with thoughts that feel automatic, interpretations that appear instantly, assumptions that you accept without questioning. You do not choose them, yet you follow them. And the more you follow them, the more they shape how you see everything. Someone says something neutral, and your mind turns it into something personal. A small problem appears, and your mind amplifies it into something overwhelming. A moment of uncertainty shows up, and your mind fills it with doubt, fear, or frustration. This is where the shift happens. You stop observing your thoughts and start obeying them. What makes this dangerous is how convincing these thoughts feel. They do not present themselves as possibilities. They present themselves as truth. And because they feel immediate and internal, you trust them without resistance. But most of these thoughts are not designed to guide you. They are designed to protect you from discomfort, even if that means distorting reality. Your mind prefers familiarity over accuracy. It prefers quick conclusions over careful understanding. It prefers emotional certainty over rational clarity. And when left unchecked, it will choose the fastest interpretation, not the most accurate one. This is how it starts working against you. You begin reacting to things that are not actually happening but that your mind has constructed. You respond to imagined intentions, exaggerated scenarios, and distorted meanings. And each reaction reinforces the pattern, making it stronger and more automatic the next time. Over time, this creates a version of reality that feels real, but is constantly pulling you out of control. But here is where everything changes. The moment you realize that not every thought deserves your trust. This is a turning point most people never reach, because it requires stepping back and questioning something that feels natural. It requires creating distance between you and your own mind. Instead of immediately believing what you think, you begin to observe it. You notice the tone, the speed, the pattern. You start asking, is this thought helping me or controlling me? Is this interpretation accurate or just convenient for my mind? And in that moment, something powerful happens. You are no longer inside the thought. You are looking at it. That separation is where control begins to return. Because once you see that your mind can generate misleading signals, you stop reacting blindly. You start choosing what to engage with and what to let pass. And when you do that consistently, your mind stops being something that controls you and becomes something you can direct. But this raises a deeper realization. If your own thoughts can pull you out of control, then what else have you been reacting to without questioning? That is where the next layer begins. The invisible cost of reacting to everything. Every reaction has a cost, even the ones that seem small, justified, or harmless. The problem is that you rarely notice the price you are paying in the moment. You only feel the accumulation later, when your mind is tired, your focus is scattered, and your sense of control feels weaker than it should. Reacting to everything does not just affect your mood. It fragments your attention. It drains your energy. It disrupts your ability to think clearly. And the more frequently you react, the more this becomes your default state. Think about how many times your day gets interrupted by something that pulls you in instantly. A message, a comment, a minor inconvenience, an unexpected change. Each time, your attention shifts abruptly. Your mind jumps from one state to another without transition, without intention. At first it feels normal. You adapt quickly. You move on. But what you do not see is what is being lost in the process. Every unnecessary reaction consumes mental energy. It forces your brain to process, interpret, and respond, even when it is not required. Over time, this constant switching weakens your ability to sustain focus. It reduces your tolerance for stillness. It makes calm feel unfamiliar. You start needing stimulation, needing engagement, needing something to react to. And when nothing is happening, your mind creates something just to avoid the discomfort of silence. This is how reactivity becomes a habit. And the cost goes even deeper. The more you react, the more you reinforce the idea that everything deserves your attention, that everything has the right to affect you, that everything has the power to shift your internal state. But that is not true. Most things do not deserve your reaction. Most situations do not require your energy. Most triggers only exist because you have conditioned yourself to respond to them. When you begin to see this, a different perspective starts to form. You realize that control is not about managing everything around you. It is about reducing how much of it you allow to enter and influence you. It is about being selective with your attention, protective of your energy, intentional with your responses, because every time you choose not to react, you are not ignoring reality. You are redefining your relationship with it. You are deciding that not everything gets access to you. And that decision changes everything. Your mind becomes quieter. Your focus becomes sharper. Your energy becomes more stable. Not because the world changed, but because you stopped engaging with everything the same way. But this leads to a deeper question. If reacting less gives you more control, why do you still feel the need to respond to everything? That is where the next illusion reveals itself. The illusion that you need to fix everything right now. There is a subtle belief guiding many of your reactions, and it operates so quietly that you rarely question it. The belief that everything needs to be resolved immediately, that every discomfort must be eliminated now, that every problem demands instant action. This belief feels responsible, it feels productive, it even feels necessary. But in reality, it is one of the fastest ways to lose control over your mind. When you think everything must be fixed right away, you remove the possibility of perspective. You eliminate the space where clarity is built. You turn every situation into pressure, even when it does not deserve it. Look closely at how this plays out. A thought appears, and you feel the need to resolve it. A concern shows up and your mind starts searching for answers immediately. A situation unfolds and you rush to respond before fully understanding it. But most situations are not improved by speed. They are improved by accuracy. And accuracy requires time. The problem is not that you are trying to solve things. The problem is that you are trying to solve them too quickly, driven by discomfort rather than understanding. Your mind does not like open loops. It does not like uncertainty. It does not like not knowing. So it pushes you to close everything as fast as possible, even if the solution is incomplete, reactive, or misaligned. And when you operate like this, you are not solving problems. You are escaping tension. This is where control slips again. Because instead of choosing the best response, you choose the fastest one. Instead of observing, you intervene. Instead of understanding, you react. But what happens when you stop doing this? What happens when you allow things to exist without immediately trying to fix them? At first, it feels uncomfortable. There is a sense of incompleteness, a quiet pressure asking you to act. But if you stay with it, something unexpected begins to happen. Your mind slows down. You start seeing more details, more context, more possibilities. The situation that once felt urgent begins to lose intensity. The problem that seemed overwhelming starts to organize itself. And in that space, better decisions emerge naturally. You realize that many things resolve themselves when you stop forcing them. That some problems only exist because you rushed into them. That clarity often arrives when you stop chasing it. This does not mean you become passive. It means you become precise. You choose when to act, not because you feel pressure, but because you see clearly. And this changes your entire relationship with control. Because now, instead of trying to manage everything immediately, you allow yourself to respond at the right moment, in the right way, for the right reasons. But this creates a new awareness. If you do not need to fix everything, then maybe you also do not need to engage with everything. And that is where a deeper level of control begins to take shape. The power of not feeding the chaos. Most people believe chaos comes from the outside, from situations, from other people, from everything that feels unpredictable and out of control. But what they fail to see is that chaos only grows when it is fed, and the way you feed it is through attention. Every time something disturbs you, and you immediately engage with it, you give it energy. You amplify it. You allow it to expand inside your mind. What could have remained small, contained, and temporary becomes louder, heavier, and harder to ignore. This is not because the situation is powerful. It is because your involvement makes it powerful. Think about how quickly something insignificant can take over your thoughts. A comment, a tone of voice, a minor inconvenience. If you keep replaying it, analyzing it, reacting to it internally, it grows. It becomes more than it actually is. But if you do not engage, something different happens. It weakens. This is a principle most people never learn. Not everything needs your participation. Not everything deserves your attention. And most importantly, not everything should be fed with your mental energy. When you stop feeding chaos, you are not ignoring reality. You are controlling how much of it is allowed to exist within you. There is a difference between noticing something and attaching to it, between being aware of a situation and becoming consumed by it. And that difference is where your control lives. At first, this feels unnatural. Your mind is used to engaging, reacting, expanding everything it touches. So when you choose not to follow a thought, not to respond internally, not to give it space, it feels like you are missing something. But you are not missing anything. You are reclaiming your focus. You begin to notice that many things disappear on their own when you stop interacting with them. Thoughts lose intensity. Emotions settle faster. Situations become smaller than they initially seemed. And this creates a new kind of strength, a quiet strength, the ability to let things pass without needing to control them, fix them, or react to them. The ability to remain centered while everything around you moves. This is not indifference. It is discipline, because you are no longer giving your energy away to everything that tries to pull it from you. And once you experience this, a deeper realization begins to form. If you can choose what not to engage with, then you can also choose how to respond when you do engage. That is where the next level of control begins. The space between stimulus and response. There is a moment that exists in every situation, but most people never notice it. It is brief, almost invisible, and easy to miss. Yet it is the most important moment when it comes to control. It is the space between what happens and how you respond. In that space, everything is decided. The problem is that for most people, this space feels non-existent. Something happens, and the reaction follows immediately. There is no pause, no awareness, no choice. Just a direct line from stimulus to response. But that is not because the space does not exist. It is because it has never been developed. When your mind is untrained, reactions feel automatic, instant, unavoidable. But when you start paying attention, you begin to notice something subtle, a fraction of a second where you can either follow the impulse or interrupt it. That fraction is where control begins. At first, it is difficult to access. The impulse is strong. The reaction feels justified. Your mind wants to move quickly, to respond, to release the tension. And if you are not aware, you will follow it like you always have. But the moment you slow down, even slightly, that space becomes clearer. You feel the reaction rising, but instead of acting on it, you hold it for just a second. You observe it. You create distance between the impulse and the action. And in that distance, something changes. You are no longer being carried by the reaction. You are looking at it. This is where power shifts back to you. Because now, instead of reacting automatically, you can choose deliberately. You can decide whether that reaction deserves to exist, whether it aligns with who you want to be, whether it is necessary at all. Most of the time, it is not. And the more you practice this, the larger that space becomes. What once felt instant now feels manageable. What once felt overwhelming now feels contained. You start responding instead of reacting. This is one of the core ideas behind Stoic discipline. As taught by Epictetus in Discourses, Book 2, Chapter 1, it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That judgment happens in this space, and if you can control that, you can control everything that follows. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Once you learn to access this space, you realize that control is not about suppressing reactions. It is about understanding them before they take over. And when you reach that level, you are no longer trying to stay calm. Calm becomes your natural state. But maintaining that state in a chaotic world requires something deeper. That is where the next level reveals itself. The art of remaining internally stable. Stability is not something you either have or do not have. It is something you build. Quietly, consistently, through the way you respond to what happens around you and within you. Most people confuse stability with the absence of problems. They believe they will feel calm when life becomes easier, when situations stop challenging them, when everything finally aligns. But that moment never arrives. And because of that, their internal state is always dependent on external conditions. Real stability works in the opposite direction. It is the ability to remain steady even when things are uncertain, to stay clear when situations become intense, to hold your ground internally while everything outside shifts. This does not mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings stop controlling you. When your internal state depends on what is happening around you, you are constantly adjusting, constantly reacting, constantly trying to regain balance. But when your stability comes from within, something changes. You become less affected. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer moving with every external force. You are anchored. Think about the difference between something that is loose and something that is grounded. The loose object moves with every push, every shift, every disturbance. The grounded one absorbs impact without losing its position. That is what internal stability looks like, and it is built through repetition. Every time you choose not to react impulsively, you reinforce it. Every time you hold your state instead of giving it away, you strengthen it. Every time you face discomfort without letting it dictate your behavior, you deepen it. At first, it requires effort, awareness, intention. You have to remind yourself not to get pulled into every situation, not to follow every emotional wave, not to let external noise define your internal state. But over time, it becomes natural. You begin to notice that things that once disturbed you no longer have the same effect. Situations that used to create tension now feel manageable. People who once triggered reactions no longer hold that power. This is not because they changed. It is because you did. You stopped outsourcing your stability. This is something Marcus Aurelius reflects on in Meditations, Book 6, paragraph 30. He reminds himself that the mind can remain untouched by external events unless it allows itself to be affected. That is the essence of internal stability. You are not trying to control the world. You are learning to remain unchanged by it. And once you reach this level, something unexpected happens. Your calm becomes visible, and not everyone knows how to deal with that. Why your calmness disturbs other people. When you begin to develop real internal stability, something subtle starts to happen around you. People notice. Not always consciously, not always in a positive way, but they feel it. Because your calm exposes something most people are trying to avoid. When someone reacts, gets frustrated, or loses control, they are operating in a pattern that feels familiar to them. It is normal, expected, shared, but when you do not respond the same way, when you remain steady where others become emotional, it breaks that pattern. And that creates discomfort. Not because you are doing anything wrong, but because your behavior reflects a different level of control, one that most people have not developed. And when people are faced with something they have not mastered, they often resist it instead of understanding it. You may notice this in small ways. Someone tries to provoke a reaction and does not get it. Someone expects you to engage emotionally and you stay composed. Someone projects frustration and you do not absorb it. And instead of that ending the situation, it sometimes intensifies it. They push more. They question your response. They interpret your calm as indifference, arrogance, or detachment. But what they are really reacting to is the absence of control they feel within themselves. Your calm removes the dynamic they are used to. It does not feed the reaction. It does not escalate the situation. It does not validate the emotional exchange they expected. And without that feedback, they are left facing their own state without distraction. This is why calmness can feel uncomfortable to others. It creates contrast. But this is where many people lose their progress. Because they feel that pressure and begin to adjust. They start reacting again, not because they lost control internally, but because they want to restore external comfort. They want to fit back into the pattern. And this is a critical point. Because if your stability depends on how others respond to it, then it is not stability, it is performance. Real control means maintaining your state regardless of how it is perceived. It means understanding that not everyone will be comfortable with your calm, and that is not your responsibility. As Seneca reflects in Letters from a Stoic, Letter 13, the opinions of others often disturb us more than events themselves. And when you allow those opinions to dictate your behavior, you give away the control you work to build. So the question becomes clear. Can you remain steady even when your calm creates tension? Because if you can, then your control is no longer fragile. It is established. And once you reach that point, you begin to see something even more important. You do not need to engage with everything or everyone that tries to pull you in. That is where the next decision begins. The decision to not engage in everything. At some point, control stops being about how you react and starts being about what you choose to engage with in the first place. This is where a deeper level of discipline appears. One that most people never develop. Because the truth is simple. Not everything deserves your attention. But your mind has been conditioned to believe the opposite. That you should respond, participate, explain, defend, react. That ignoring something means weakness or avoidance. That staying out of something means losing control. In reality, it is the opposite. Every time you engage with something unnecessary, You give it access to your time, your energy, and your mental space. You allow it to exist inside you, and once it is inside, it begins to influence you. This is why selective engagement is power. You start recognizing that just because something reaches you does not mean it deserves a response. Just because something invites your attention does not mean you have to accept. There is a difference between being aware and being involved. Most people collapse these two. They see something and immediately become part of it. They hear something and instantly react. They feel something and follow it without questioning. But when you separate awareness from involvement, everything changes. You can see without absorbing. You can hear without reacting. You can notice without attaching. And this creates space. In that space, you are no longer being pulled in multiple directions. You are no longer scattered. You are centered because your attention is not being distributed to everything around you. This requires a decision, a conscious choice to step back from what does not matter, to disengage from what does not add value, to stop participating in dynamics that only exist because people keep feeding them. At first, this feels uncomfortable. You may feel the urge to respond, to clarify, to involve yourself. You may feel like you are leaving something unresolved. But what you are actually doing is protecting your control. You are deciding that your energy is not unlimited, and therefore it must be directed with precision. This is something Marcus Aurelius reflects on in Meditations, Book 4, Paragraph 3, when he reminds himself not to waste what remains of his life on unnecessary concerns. That same principle applies here. Your attention is your life, and where you place it determines how you experience everything. So when you choose not to engage, you are not losing anything. You are reclaiming something. But this leads to an even deeper layer of control. Because sometimes, the most powerful response is not just disengagement. It is silence. Silence as a strategy of power. Silence is often misunderstood. Most people see it as absence, hesitation, or even weakness. They associate it with not knowing what to say, with avoiding confrontation, with lacking presence. But in reality, silence can be one of the most precise and controlled responses you can choose. Because silence is not empty, it is intentional. When you stop responding automatically, when you choose not to fill every gap with words, reactions, or explanations, you create space. And in that space, you regain control over the direction of the moment. Think about how often people speak just to release tension. They explain too much, react too quickly, defend themselves without being attacked, or respond before fully understanding what is happening. Not because it is necessary, but because silence feels uncomfortable. So they break it. But that discomfort is where your power is. When you remain silent, you are not being passive. You are observing. You are processing. You are deciding whether a response is needed at all. And if it is, what kind of response actually serves you. This shifts the entire dynamic, because instead of reacting to the moment, you are shaping it. Silence removes urgency. It slows everything down. It forces clarity. And most importantly, it prevents you from saying or doing something that does not align with who you want to be. There is a discipline in holding back, in not responding immediately, in allowing things to unfold without interfering. And when you master this, something interesting happens. People begin to reveal more than they intended. Situations begin to clarify themselves. Tension often dissolves on its own because it is no longer being fueled by constant reaction. Silence changes the rhythm of interaction. It gives you time, and time gives you perspective. This is something Epictetus emphasizes in Discourses, Book 1, Chapter 29, when he speaks about restraining impulses and not being carried away by immediate reactions. Silence is one of the clearest expressions of that restraint. But this does not mean you never speak. It means when you do, it is deliberate. Your words become fewer but stronger, more precise, more aligned, because they are not driven by impulse, but by choice. And once you experience this, you begin to understand something deeper. Control is not about doing more. It is often about doing less, but doing it with intention. But maintaining this level of control consistently requires more than awareness. It requires training. Training your mind not to be controlled. Control is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It is something you practice, reinforce, and refine every single day. Without training, even the strongest awareness fades. Old patterns return, reactions take over again. This is why most people understand what they should do, but still fail to do it when it matters. Because understanding is not enough. Your mind follows what it has practiced the most. Not what you agree with, not what you believe in, but what you repeat. And if you have spent years reacting automatically, engaging with everything, and giving into impulses, that pattern will not disappear just because you decided to change. It needs to be replaced. Training your mind means creating new patterns that become stronger than the old ones. It means repeating controlled responses until they feel natural. It means choosing awareness even when it is uncomfortable, even when reacting would be easier. At first, this feels like effort. You have to catch yourself, interrupt reactions, stay present. It requires attention and discipline. But this is where the shift happens. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you are rewiring something. Every time you observe a thought instead of following it, you are building distance. Every time you choose not to engage, you are strengthening control. These are not isolated actions. They are repetitions. And repetition builds identity. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic. What once felt difficult becomes your default. And the reactions that used to control you begin to lose strength, not because you are suppressing them, but because you have stopped reinforcing them. This is how discipline transforms into stability. But there is another layer to this. Training is not only about what you do in intense moments. It is also about how you prepare in calm ones. If you only try to control your mind when pressure appears, you will struggle, because you are trying to apply a skill that has not been practiced consistently. But if you train in small moments, in everyday situations, your mind becomes conditioned to respond differently before the pressure even arrives. You become ready. This is reflected in the Stoic approach to preparation. Seneca, in Letters from a Stoic, letter 18, speaks about practicing hardship and restraint before they are required, so that when challenges appear, the mind is not surprised or overwhelmed. The same principle applies here. You do not wait for chaos to learn control. You build control so that chaos has no effect when it comes. And once this training becomes consistent, something changes in a way that is impossible to fake. Your control stops being something you try to maintain. It becomes something you embody. And when that happens, you begin to experience a state most people never reach. A state where nothing easily shakes you. The day. Nothing shakes you anymore. There comes a moment, not sudden but built over time, where you realize something has changed. The same situations are still there. The same people, the same unpredictability, the same pressure. But your response is different. What once triggered you now passes without impact. What once pulled you in now feels distant. What once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. And the most important part is this. You did not force this change. You built it. This is what real control looks like. It is not about eliminating difficulty. It is about no longer being moved by it in the same way. It is about reaching a point where your internal state is no longer dependent on what happens externally. You start noticing it in small moments first. A situation that would have irritated you before no longer gets a reaction. A comment that would have stayed in your mind all day now fades quickly. A delay, a problem, a disruption no longer shifts your entire mood. And then it becomes clearer. You are not resisting anything. You are not suppressing emotions. You are simply not being taken over by them. There is a stability that begins to define how you experience everything. Your mind feels quieter, not empty, but organized. Your thoughts feel slower, not delayed, but deliberate. Your reactions feel intentional, not forced. And because of that, your presence changes. You are no longer easily influenced by the emotional state of others. You are no longer pulled into every situation. You are no longer available to everything that tries to demand your attention. You become selective, grounded, clear. This is something Marcus Aurelius reflects on in Meditations, Book 7, paragraph 63, when he reminds himself that the mind can remain steady regardless of what surrounds it, as long as it does not surrender itself to disturbance. That is what you begin to experience. But there is something important to understand here. This state is not permanent unless it is maintained. It is not something you reach and forget. It is something you continue to embody through awareness and discipline. Because the same patterns that once controlled you do not disappear completely. They become weaker, but they are still there. And if you stop paying attention, they can return. But now you are different. You see them earlier. You recognize them faster. You interrupt them before they grow. And because of that, you do not lose control the way you used to. You recover faster. You adjust quicker. You remain centered more consistently. And this leads to a realization that changes everything. The goal was never to control the world. It was to reach a point where the world no longer controls you. And when you reach that point, there is only one thing left to understand. Mastering yourself is the only victory that matters. There is a point where you stop looking outward for control and finally understand where it has always been. Not in circumstances, not in other people, not in outcomes, but within you. Everything you tried to manage before begins to lose importance, not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines you. The need to control situations fades. The need to be understood weakens. The need to react dissolves. What remains is something far more solid. Self-mastery. This is the kind of control that does not depend on anything external. It does not fluctuate with success or failure. It does not break under pressure. It does not disappear when things do not go your way, because it is not built on what happens. It is built on how you choose to exist regardless of what happens. You begin to see clearly that every moment presents the same opportunity, to give your control away or to keep it, to react or to respond, to be pulled or to remain grounded. And over time, these choices stop feeling like effort. They become identity. You are no longer trying to stay calm. You are calm. You are no longer trying to avoid being controlled. You simply are not available to be controlled. This is what the Stoic philosophers pointed to, not as an abstract idea, but as a practical way of living. Epictetus, in Enchiridion, section 1, makes it clear that some things are within our control and others are not, and peace begins the moment you stop confusing the two. Marcus Aurelius reinforces this in Meditations, Book 8, paragraph 36, when he reminds himself that the mind becomes what it chooses to focus on and accept. And Seneca, in Letters from a Stoic, letter 71, speaks about the highest good being a mind that is stable, independent, and not shaken by external forces. All of this leads to one conclusion. The world will always be unpredictable. People will always act in ways you cannot control. Situations will always change without your permission. But none of that has the power to take over your life unless you allow it. And once you truly understand this, something shifts permanently. You stop chasing control where it does not exist. You stop giving your energy to what does not matter. You stop reacting to everything that tries to pull you away from yourself. Because you realize that the only victory that was ever yours to achieve was this one, to master your own mind. And once you do that, nothing else has the power to master you.